and welcome to another edition of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast, your home for all the latest Minnesota Lynx and WNBA news, analysis, and coverage. Thank you for tuning into another episode this week. I'm your host, Mitchell Hansen, and this week I'm very excited to be joined by ESPN reporter and analyst and sideline reporter for the Connecticut Sun, Terrika Foster-Brasby. It was great getting a chance to talk with her a little bit about where she's been, the WNBA season so far, and the Minnesota Lynx. It was really great insight. She's part of a very talented team at ESPN, and just kind of in the world of the WNBA and women's basketball, and being able to report on it. And you'll hear in the podcast recording here in a bit that she's extremely knowledgeable about the WNBA for one, and about basketball for one. But she's very tuned in and keyed into the league and all 12 teams. And it was great chatting with her, and not only getting insight about herself and how she's gotten to where she is, into her current position at ESPN and elsewhere, but just kind of hearing her break down each team and different players and the game in general was very entertaining. Before we jump into that, I want to bring to light a little bit of news about our playbacks. We call them Lynx Live, myself and Jack Borman from Canis Hoopus. We just released our July schedule. We're going to be doing a few games this month again, like we did in June. On Playback, we'll be watching either games live, we'll be rewatching games, or this month we're going to do something new. We're going to be hosting a live Lynx mailbag. In the past, you've seen, not just for myself, but you've seen myself, write Lynx mailbags at Canis Hoopus and other areas. Instead of doing that in written form, like we traditionally have, where I'd ask questions on social media, we're going to do it in a live broadcast and let you guys ask us in real time. So if you'd like to join that and our other Lynx live broadcasts and live streams, live watch parties throughout the month, it's free. Please do so by checking out playback.tv/Lynx Live. Once again, that's playback.tv/Lynx Live. Without further ado, let's jump into the podcast this week with Terrika Foster-Brasby. Terrika, how are you doing? Thank you for joining me.
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, but before we get started and before we kind of jump into things, I just wanted to start by allowing you to kind of tell people, allow the listeners to where they can follow you, where they can find your work, and where they can kind of track everything.
Yeah, well, I am all over social media, so you can definitely follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at She Knows Sports, She Knows Sports _ on Instagram. And I'm literally everywhere, so you can definitely find me usually weekly on Around the Rim, which is a women's basketball show on ESPN's YouTube that I co-host with LaChina Robinson. I'm also doing sideline for the Connecticut Sun. So anytime the Connecticut Sun is on a game, you can usually either catch me on the sideline or hear me doing color commentary for the team on away games. But for the most part, anywhere there's women's basketball, you can most likely find me somewhere lurking around.
I do like specifically the show. I do like that you and LaChina do a great job with that, and I'm a regular listener or viewer, so I enjoy it, and I appreciate all the coverage you guys give.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great. We've been rocking out for the last 8 seasons, and we've certainly had our fair share of ups and downs, but it's just great to be able to have something of that magnitude this long.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's great. I just kind of want to dive in a little bit before we get into the basketball aspect of things. I wanted to dive in a little bit about you. I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit, maybe, or if you could talk a little bit about your journey to kind of where you are. You outlined where all your work, or where people can find your work and where they can find you right now, but talk maybe a little bit about how you got there and kind of how you got introduced to this field.
Yeah, well, it's really weird. I did not take a traditional path to media, that's for sure. I was just kind of one who had always had a love for sports. I played basketball, volleyball, softball, baseball. I did all of that. I only really took basketball, baseball, and volleyball serious. But I've always had a love of sports. So it's always been a part of my life. So I've always loved talking about it. I honestly thought my career path was going to take me down the field of law. My degree is in political science. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a lawyer, studied pre-law. That's what I thought I was doing until I applied for Arizona State Law School. I saw the bill. I was like, whoa, 47, how much $1,000? Maybe we'll try something different. So that's how that derailed. But yeah, it was just always something that was more like a hobby for me. And I had a lot of people who supported like blogs that I would write for, who would ask me to contribute things for them. And they were like, Terrika, you might want to take this career like seriously. You might want to look at it for more than just a hobby and like really find out how you can be a bigger presence in the sports space. And so I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, you know what, you're right. So I ended up going back to grad school to get my degree in journalism. And I had always been a fan of the W, had always loved women's basketball, played basketball. I had Cheryl Swoops' shoe. I admired Cynthia Cooper growing up. I'm from Detroit, so huge Detroit Shock fan. It was just always something that was there. And so when an opportunity came at ESPN, I took advantage of it. I filled out the application. I had no idea that they would even select me, but they did. And from there, I just really used my networking ability to try to figure out how I can get to know more people and where, what was the culture like in this space, and how could I, take what I was good at and what I was doing and like really use that to help make me different, but still fit into this space. And that's really what the journey has been. Since then, that was, gosh, I want to say I've probably been covering this sport for maybe the last 12 years, but like officially covering for like maybe the last 9, where it's just really been a lot of fun getting to know people. And it's been a lot of fun watching women's basketball evolve and watching the sport grow. I was producing podcasts at first, and then I started, pitching ideas and being a voice here and there on people's different podcasts and their shows. And then when we were given Around the Rim at ESPN, I think that really opened the door for people to know that I was someone who was really serious about elevating the women's game, taking opportunities to write. So have contributed a few stories to different outlets, the New York Times, W Slam. So I have just really been blessed to have been decent enough in a lot of different areas that people enjoy what I write or enjoy what I say. But it certainly wasn't a traditional, path for me. I didn't work in a newsroom. I didn't, study journalism in college as an undergrad. So I didn't, work for the school paper or anything like that. It was literally a hobby that I turned into a career. And I have not looked back since.
Yeah, it kind of to one of the things you touched on with how fun it is covering the WNBA. I would say that it's maybe, well, maybe it is, different than any other sport that is out there, that maybe the inclusion, the community of even just reporters and writers and bloggers, whoever it may be. It's a big community, and everybody wants to help each other, even inside the league. And that's something that you don't really get to see anywhere else. And that's, I think, what makes it maybe a little bit more fun. It's more inclusive than maybe anything else. Do you kind of agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I've focused on women's basketball, but I've covered everything. I've done NFL, I've done MLB and NBA and college basketball. And the WNBA is probably the most inclusive network of people that I have ever been around. Everything else is really saturated, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, as those sports are older, so they have a ton of coverage, but because of that, they have also some people also have, this culture of, I have to be the first one to get it. I have to be the first one to put it out. I've got to, undercut something in order to stay relevant because the spots are so limited. And I think what makes the W so different is that we kind of all had a grassroots beginning in a way. So we all understand the grind. We all understand the hustle. We all understand that in order to grow the sport, there needs to be more people talking about it. There needs to be more people writing about it. So I think that has kind of all played a role in how we get along with each other, how we know each other and talk to each other. And don't get me wrong, there's still moments where, you know, you throw your hand up and you're like, there are gatekeepers everywhere. There are some who still don't quite understand that, you know, there's room for all of us. So it's not entirely perfect, but this is honestly one of the best sports communities in professional sports that I have been a part of. And so I love that I get to cover the WNBA. While it might be smaller than some of the other sports that I have had to cover, it certainly is the most fulfilling for me.
Mm-hmm. And it's fun to, you know, I was talking to somebody, I was talking to Rachel Galligan last week on my podcast about the coverage of, you know, anything that you provide. It helps grow the game too. It may be smaller. You know, the game wants to grow, the league wants to grow, but that's part of it too, is getting that high quality coverage and the coverage it deserves. And that's the other kind of fulfilling part, at least from my end of, you know, doing what we do is, you know, we get to help in that in some way. And it's fun being kind of a small part of all of that.
I know, absolutely. And Rachel's the best. She's one of the ones who helps to grow the sport in the off season. If you guys aren't following Rachel during free agency and trade deadline, you guys are missing out. Her and Christina Williams are the Wojs, the ones that keep us on our toes.
Yes, absolutely. No, they're both great. And yeah, it's fun to even from, you know, like a reporter side, I like following Rachel. I like following, you know, I like following you. I like following Christina. You know, a lot of people's work that you build the relationships too. And it's kind of maybe a friendship of seeing them succeed is great. And also you're a fan at the same time. So it's fun to follow all that stuff. And most of the time I even get my news from Rachel, Christina, or whoever else it may be. So that's great. But when you were talking about, you know, obviously the coverage, part of your coverage is at ESPN. You know, I was right before we got on to record this podcast, you know, I was watching the All-Star selection or team selection show with LaChina, Monica McNutt. They're both great. You know, I've had Alexis Philpott on here, Alexis, a few times, or at one, I don't know, maybe a few weeks ago on one of my earlier podcasts. I had Kevin Pelton. I mean, just the list of you know, Emma Vopel or Michael Vopel, you know, the list of, you know, talented individuals on air, writers, you know, it's a lot of fun to follow. What's it like for you to kind of be a part of that big team?
Well, I can honestly say it's a dream come true for me, just because I think anyone who ever, you know, wanted to work in sports media had a goal or has a goal at some point to be a part of the ESPN family. It's the mothership, right? So it's definitely a dream come true in that regard. But also it's a little bit of I guess the best way that I can describe it is it's reassuring, right? Because, you know, some of us, again, didn't start off or didn't have the traditional path. And so to be able to be part of a coverage team that includes former coaches, you know, former champions, someone like M.A. Vopel, who's been writing about women's basketball for the last 30 years, you know, to sit next to a Carolyn Peck, who is a national champion, first Black woman to win a national championship as a head coach, and have her engage in conversation with you and feel accepted and that your opinions matter, and have her encourage you. Like, that is so reassuring as a young, and I mean, I'll still say young, even though I'm almost 40, dear God. But as a young reporter, like those kinds of things matter. To kind of be figuring it out with Alexa. Alexa was just recently added to the ESPN crew over the last couple of years. And so there have been moments where she and I have been like, we're at this event, we don't know what we're doing, but we're here and we're going to make it happen. Right. And like, to have that kind of camaraderie it's very important. And also because I know that, you know, despite sometimes there are moments where folks on social media or others don't quite understand the things that happen in the back channels, but there are a lot of people at ESPN who do and want to help grow women's basketball. And the group that we have is certainly the group that wants to do that. So just to even be a part of seeing, you know, every time there's a new press release that comes out about how the numbers have grown on a game, how the viewership has increased, how we're adding more games to the coverage. Like those things I'm so proud of and so proud to be a part of, because I know when we look back on this years later, I have an opportunity to say, you know, I was a part of seeing that come to fruition, or it was one of my ideas that generated something that people love and people enjoy. So it's definitely amazing to work with the people that we work with, and just have this opportunity to really take advantage of everyone wanting to get in on the WNBA right now. Like at some point, it was kind of one of those things where people overlooked the league, and now it's so hot. Like everyone wants to get in on women's basketball right now, and I'm glad that I'm already a part of it.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to your career, do you have any, you know, favorite moments? Maybe it was getting hired at ESPN. Do you have any favorite moments or memories that kind of stand out to you to this point in your career?
Oh gosh, there's so many. It's crazy. There are a ton of moments that are just like, wow, that's really pretty dope. I remember the first time I interviewed Cynthia Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, I had my video up, and it was in radio. I was producing. I produced for 6.5 years. And this one particular moment, I could not, the China was not able to make the interview. So she was like, Terrika, just do the interview for us so that we can have it. And in my mind, I was like, what? You want me to interview Cynthia Cooper? What do I say? Like, oh my God. Because she was just so big. One of my favorite players growing up. And so I'm talking to her in the calmest voice, and I have my questions all written out, but I'm really on video going freaking berserk because I cannot believe that I'm on the phone with Cynthia Cooper. So like, to me, that's like one of the better or more favorite moments. I also had some really bad moments too. I will never forget the late great Vin Scully. And for anyone who's not aware of who Vin Scully is, he was the voice of Dodgers baseball for years. And I was doing an episode of Baseball Tonight, and I was with Buster Olney, and I was like so shocked that I was sitting there and having the opportunity to record Vin Scully that I forgot to push the record button.
Oh, no.
So they're like already like 5 minutes into the interview, and I'm like, holy crap, how do I tell Buster and Vin that I'm actually not recording this? It was the absolute worst. I was just so, in my feelings, and I was so like nervous that I was doing everything wrong. So I didn't record it. I tried to start it over, ended up hanging up on Vin Scully. It was just a terrible showing. I never recorded another BBTN again after that. So that just kind of lets you know how they were like, we're going to keep you away from those people. So it's so I've definitely had I've had my good and my bad moments, believe me.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Thank you for sharing those. Those are not, I don't want to say funny, but looking back on it, yeah, I'm sure at the time it wasn't great. But...
I'm forever known as the girl who hung up on Vin Scully.
Oh, that's funny. Let's dive a little bit into some WNBA talk. Obviously we're kind of nearing we are nearing the midway point in the season, getting up on All-Star break. What are your thoughts on what we've seen so far, and is it any different than maybe what you thought we'd see going into the year?
Yeah, it's really different, honestly. Didn't quite expect the Vegas Aces to be this good. I mean, I expected them to be good, absolutely, but we're literally halfway through the season and they've only lost 2 games. Like, that is exceptionally good. And so I'm super excited to see what they will continue to do as they continue to gel and adjust to get better throughout the second half of the season. I am also, I want to say impressed with Connecticut. No one expected them to be in the position that they're in. And even after losing a huge piece to their offense in Brianna Jones, they're still, one of the top 3 teams in the league. So impressed with them for sure. Individually, super impressed with all of these 40-point performances that we're seeing across women's basketball. Literally, Brianna Stewart has 2, Ryan Howard, Dewana Bonner, just like Jewel Loy, like everyone is playing their best basketball right now. And that's really great to see. And I'm sorry that like there's sirens going on in my background. There's never an emergency until I am doing a recording for something. So
as long as it's not coming to your place, that's okay.
Yeah, no emergency here. It was like always something. But I've been incredibly impressed there. And then like even now we're starting to see the teams that didn't have such a great start to their season really starting to pick things up. I mean, currently, at the time of this recording, the Liberty is playing Seattle and they're into a tie game. Minnesota has been on a 4-game win streak because Nafisa Collier has just been playing out of her mind at this point. Atlanta is still in the conversation at 500 because they, can match up with anybody at any given time. Shout out to Cheyenne Parker finally becoming an all-star this year. So really, like, honestly, the league is it's continued to grow and be different. And as this season is longer, we're only going to see teams get better. So I'm even expecting more things to like kind of shock us and surprise us, even though we're only midway through.
You kind of talked about, maybe the Aces being, I don't want to say maybe one of the surprises, but how good they are right now is being kind of a surprise. Is there anybody on the other side of that? To me, it kind of seems maybe like Phoenix is kind of maybe the most maybe disappointing, that a lot of people thought they'd be better than what they are. Is there a team that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, you nailed it. Phoenix is definitely not a 3-13 team when you look at their roster.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that there were going to be some adjustments with Brittany Griner coming back and also needing to fit into what the new scheme would look like, considering she didn't get a chance to be coached by Vanessa Nygaard, who is no longer there, by the way. So, but I did not see or anticipate a 3-13 team. I mean, Michaela Onyenwere is one of the better small forwards in the league. Mariah Jefferson is not a terrible point guard at all. Diana Taurasi is still there. Sophie Cunningham has shot the ball really well this year. It just, there's a disconnect somewhere in that team, and it's not based upon their ability to play basketball. It's based upon their ability to play basketball together. And I don't know who's going to be able to spark that, for them. I don't know if it's going to be Nikki. I don't know if it's going to have to be someone on the team, but they're certainly the most disappointing. And I think the other team that would not, I don't want to say disappointing, but I would say I don't know what direction they're going to go in, and that's Chicago, and it's it's not, a foregone thought that they now are also a team that is without a head coach, right? And so how that plays into what they do for the remainder of the season is also going to be interesting. But, they started off this season undefeated for a while, and then they, took a couple of losses, and then they went on like a 4-game losing streak. And it was sort of one of those things where, I don't know what to make of the team. I don't know if it's a chemistry issue, if it's a mental issue, because, basketball is just as much mental as it is physical. And that plays a huge role. So I think, to me, those two may be the most disappointing.
Yeah, when it comes to Chicago, it seems like obviously they're going through a transition of out of that title team, but you want during that time you want a steady head coach, you want a steady GM in that leading the way. And that throws another wrench into it with James Wade leaving, that now they have to figure everything out. They almost have to start from the ground up and just figure out what they want to do.
Yeah.
So they're very much kind of in limbo right now of, okay, which direction are we going to go into? Who do we want leading that direction? Because even if you bring in somebody new, they might want to switch everything up. So it's a very interesting time in Chicago, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's also one of those reasons that I think a lot of people have been advocating more recently for splitting the head coach and GM position. I mean, it's already a weird situation when you got to coach the same players you've just negotiated a contract for. But in a situation like what we just saw with Chicago, when a coach decides to leave, you're now down 2 positions. You're down a GM and a head coach. And to ask someone to step into that role on an interim level, especially maybe, possibly being someone who's never had to do it before, can't be easy. And it certainly can't be easy midway through the season.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It'll be interesting to watch, those 2 teams that you just talked about, just to kind of see where they go from here. I think that's very interesting because we're used to seeing them right in the mix. And yep. Obviously you could even say Seattle, we're not used to seeing them at the bottom.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how things can change so fast. But When it comes to, the point that we're at in the season, do you have some front runners for some midseason awards? Maybe let's start maybe with like MVP. Who do you think would be your MVP so far?
Well, at the beginning of the season, I said my MVP would probably be Alyssa Thomas. So I'm not taking her out of the top three, but I think the front runner right now has to absolutely be Breanna Stewart. Just the fact that she has been carrying the New York Liberty, 240-point performances. She's an all-star captain once again. She's just honestly playing the kind of basketball that I think we all knew and expected her to play, but just on a different level. When Stewie's on, she's on. And there aren't many people that's going to be able to stop her or stop what she's doing. I can't see at this point in the season right now, if I had to give the award away, it would most likely have to be to Breanna Stewart as the MVP. But I'm not ruling out Alyssa Thomas. Okay. Like Alyssa is she's still someone who I think has an opportunity. I mean, if this Connecticut team finds a way to sneak into the WNBA finals again, I mean, hello. So yeah, I think that's the front runner for me. When I think about most improved, I actually think about Satu Sabally. Satu Sabally is a premier person for Dallas. And I say person because she does so many things, right? She defends, she shoots, she's such a presence inside. In their matchup against Las Vegas a few days ago, one of the reasons that Vegas was able to play so well was because she was no longer in the game in the second half. And that took away a huge inside presence for Dallas. And if anyone who watched that team win against Las Vegas just last night, or, not sure when they'll be listening, but in that win against Las Vegas, they were able to do that because they played through their bigs, Satu Sabally being one of them. And so just how she's been able to be so dominant, she's an all-star again this year. I think that she's someone who certainly should be in the most improved player category. Rookie of the year for me is absolutely right now Aaliyah Boston. I don't even know if I need to provide an argument for that because she's just played so extremely well. Coach of the year, I think Stephanie White for sure. Just again, coming into the season, thinking that you have your full core, only to find out that Jonquil Jones is going to be traded. Jasmine Thomas is going to leave as well. You've lost Brianna Jones again, as I mentioned. And yet you still have this team as a top 2 team in the league. Connecticut is playing like a faster paced game. They're more offensively sound than they have been, but still keeping to their defensive identity. I just think that she really has the players' trust, and has really built a great coaching staff with the idea of former players being the key to that. Majority of her coaching staff are all former WNBA players, former basketball players, and I think that resonates a little differently with athletes currently. They know, that where they're coming from and where they've been, and that you see the floor in a way that they see the floor. So she's certainly leading my coach of the year category. But I don't know. I think that's all I got. Oh, sixth woman of the year. I have no idea who could be sixth woman of the year right now. That's a tough one for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost seemed like, the players that were in that conversation last year are now firmly in the starting lineup. And that one's always kind of a gray area for me because a lot of players do swap between starter and coming off the bench. And we regularly see that. But I would say, like, if coming into the year, I might be a little bit biased because I've paid it or kind of been tuned into them a little bit more. I thought Ariel Powers was kind of be maybe that sixth player of the year, but
I could have seen that. I was worried though, honestly, because I didn't understand. Like, and I know Cheryl is the kind of coach who wants to make people earn their spots, and that's just how she is. But I didn't understand even before her injury why her minutes had dwindled the way that they did. Ariel comes off the bench. She gets, well, honestly, I honestly felt like maybe she should have had a starting position, but even in her coming off the bench, she gives so much energy. She's such a scorer. I didn't understand why she wasn't playing as much, considering that the one thing that I criticized Minnesota on was that they needed to find a way to find other people to get them buckets outside of Nafisa. If Kayla McBride isn't on, Aerial Powers to me had to be the next go-to. And I was just not understanding Cheryl's where her mindset was or her strategy and placing Ariel where she was placing her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a kind of an interesting storyline all year long. I mean, right now she's obviously dealing with some ankle issues, so that's why she's been out. But I mean, even when she was healthy, it was a very odd story and kind of dynamic there. So hopefully she's able to get back healthy soon, and if and when she does, that'll be a interesting thing to see unfold and how she kind of fits back into everything. I could, depending on what happens with Minnesota, I could maybe even see them seeing if they could, maybe try and cut ties with her and let her go somewhere else if she is healthy. But
yeah, I could see that too.
Yeah.
But I will say Minnesota has certainly been a team that has shocked me in the way that, or let me rephrase, I won't say shocked me. I will say on brand. And by on brand, I mean, you can never count a team that is coached by Cheryl Reeve out. You never can. And so granted, they didn't start the season the way that they typically start a season. And I certainly feel like they are still trying to find who they are and what their identity is in a post Sylvia Fowles era. But I also feel like it is not surprising to me that this team is continuing to climb the ranks, and slowly but surely, as we get towards the end of the season, I can still see Minnesota as a team that could possibly be in position for a playoff spot. It just wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, to be honest, I see them possibly battling with Seattle for that spot, because Seattle, again, is another team that, while haven't had started the way that they want to, they're getting Gabby Williams back. Jewel Lloyd still is a key factor for them. So I can see a Minnesota-Seattle kind of battle at the bottom of the standings for who could get that 8 or that 7 seed. But yeah, Minnesota, I'm not surprised. I wasn't worried per se about them, because I knew that the Lynx have way too many pieces who do know how to get hot effectively, that can really help propel them, and still not playing with Jessica Shepard, right? So we're like, this is happening without another major piece to their offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's weird that what I think it's the last 3 years, they've started the year at least 0-4. This year was 0-6, but they've turned it around each year. I mean, last year they finished just short of a playoff spot, but they've been able to figure that out. And I don't know what the recipe is. I don't know if it's, maybe the new faces that come in each off season. It's hard to kind of adjust to all of that. I understand that aspect of things, especially this year with the complete new look of the team. But like you said, it seems like Cheryl figures something out, and they end up turning it around, at least at some point. Now, whether that's sustainable or not, well, that's to be determined. But they're playing some great basketball right now, and it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, agreed. Nafisa Collier, all-star, certainly going to be in the MVP conversation if she keeps it up. She's had like 4 30+ point games. Like she's, and this is all coming back from maternity leave. Like, sis, I couldn't play like this with 20 years worth of time. You're playing like this after having a baby. You're amazing.
Yeah. I mean, even just seeing her come back last year, I understandably so, she wasn't to any, form of what she is now last year, just because she wasn't back to full strength, and who could blame her? But just to see her actually come back and play in a WNBA game last year was unbelievable.
Wild. Yeah. Yep. Wild.
Yeah. I don't know how she did it, but let's kind of dive a little bit more into the Lynx. We kind of jumped into it a little bit there, but what do you think of the team that we have seen so far? You talked about Nafisa Collier, Kayla McBride playing a little bit of a role, but what do you think's been working so well for Minnesota, even during this strong stretch that they've had?
Well, one thing that I do think that has worked well for them is the way that they've been incorporating Diamond Miller. I know that she missed about 7 or 8 games due to an injury, and that was Very unfortunate because she was really starting to find a rhythm. And I think that whatever she was doing in that time off, she must have maintained some type of workout plan or session, because she jumped back into it, getting back into the rhythm, and even elevating it from when she left. I think she had like 18 points in her first game back, 16 points after that. Like, that's kind of what Minnesota needed, because not Minnesota had, to me, this Lynx team teeters defensively and sometimes doesn't show up offensively. And their defense had been what had honestly won them a lot of games, but they had to figure out how to get other people active on the offensive end of the basketball. And that, I think, is what Diamond Miller was able to bring to them upon her return back from injury. And you could see that once she had a lot of the energy, and with Fee having a lot of the energy and being someone that you can count on late in games. I've heard Cheryl in a few press conferences say, I want Nafisa to be aggressive. I want her to be dominant. I need her to be the person that we can get the ball to and be comfortable in her shots, right? So you hear that, you see that, right? But at the same time that you're seeing that and you're hearing that, someone's got to get her the ball, right? Someone's got to be aggressive on their side as well. So I've been starting to see that more from Diamond. I've also been starting to see that more from Lindsay Allen. And that's someone who I think has the potential to be an even bigger role player than she has been. She's a solid point guard, and we need her to be a bit more, to give a bit more, give a bit extra, take care of the basketball a bit more, and just continue to create that kind of space that can get, Fee open the ball, that can push off of Diamond Miller. And so I like those things, but there is still, there's still some things that are missing that can propel this team to the next level. And I think just being able to, one, continue to find an offensive rhythm day in and day out, and not just here and there. And then two, just obviously being bigger, providing and being a bigger presence inside. And I think they'll be able to do that once they get Jessica Shepard back. But when you're playing against some of the bigger teams, that's a thing that you're certainly going to want to have to, that you're going to have to beef up on. But I'm excited to see. I think Dorka has done a great job as well, trying to come in, stepping into the starting lineup a couple games, trying to provide that inside presence that has been missing in Shepard's absence. So you've got she had a couple of big games, 10, 12-point games from her. I think those things are very impactful for a young team, again, trying to figure out what their identity is going to be. So I do like what I'm seeing, and especially in this 5-6 game swing, you can see the differences. You can see their comfortability together. You can see them playing bigger inside, which is, again, when you look at their schedule and who they've had to play teams that have had, with the exception of Seattle, they've had to play teams that have had, bigger bigs inside, and they've had to find ways to counter that. But I like it. I think their trajectory is on the right path right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think is maybe a missing piece on the Lynx? Is it that post position? That's what I would say if I was voting for. But what do you think is maybe there's more than one missing piece that they should focus on?
I think the one thing that they have to figure out, as much as I just complimented her, I think the one thing they have to figure out is they have to get a true point guard. Like, that is a huge piece. And honestly, it's a huge piece for any team, but I don't think that we value the point guard position as much as we used to, simply because we've kind of moved into this era of positionless basketball, where there are many people who can bring the ball up the court, or there are many people who can handle the rock in a way that you feel comfortable with them in that role. But it makes a true difference when you have a true point guard. When you look at an Enrique Ngumbawale, like, that's a true point guard, and you see that and you're like, got it. You know what I mean? When you look at what Atlanta's doing and having Ryan Howard and Alicia Gray, like, those are the things that matter. So I think having a true point guard makes the difference. And you want to see Lindsay maybe step up a bit more in that role, or if they were able to find someone to focus specifically on that, I think that would be a bit more helpful. But that's a thing for me. And it's not just with Minnesota. There are a couple teams that I think the trajectory of who they are and what they could do would be totally different if they had a true point guard really running the team, putting people in position, being that coach on the floor. Like, that's what's certainly needed. And I think that's a big piece outside of the post presence for Minnesota.
It'll be really interesting to see what Minnesota does and how they maneuver specifically this offseason.
Yeah.
They're going to have some contracts that come off the books, and they're going through the rebuilding phase, the initial stage, even while having somebody like Nafisa Collier, but they're going through that stage with all of this coming up. Like they're if they do struggle, the second half of the year, they're going to have a good pick. They're going to have a lot of room. They have two really good pieces to build around. Well, more than two, but just, Diamond Miller and Nafisa Collier are definitely two that stand out. So they're interesting. I mean, if all it takes is, maybe adding a piece or two to this team, and I think that they're right back up there, and they could definitely contend again. But
yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think this streak that they're on right now is really just kind of showing the potential of what they have, and they might just, again, need to figure out exactly how they can work more together with what they do well already. Like that's really the biggest. Now there's going to be a huge test coming up for them. I believe in the coming days they're going to have to face Las Vegas, and that's a test for anyone. Like that's a test for everyone in the league. So, I would just say don't stray away from what had worked for you. Don't stay away from what you were able to do well against Phoenix. Don't stay away from what worked for you earlier or going into this streak. Like continue to maintain that. But yeah, like it is a rebuilding team is never something that you're going to fix in a year. And it certainly can't be all on Nafisa to fix, right? So, Kurt Shell-Reeve is going to have to make some decisions in this offseason on who gets to stay, who gets to leave, what exactly you want to work around and build around. And if building around Nafisa is what you want to do and what you should do, then you certainly want to look at what you need to do with Aerial Powers. For example, she's someone who you might, find some value with some additional pieces for her. But if you're not going to utilize her to her strengths, then you certainly don't want to just keep her on your bench.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be a very, I mean, you could even, mention, Natalie Achanwa, how that dynamic all works out. Maybe she comes back, but she's going to have to come back for less if she wants to come back. I mean, you could even throw in, Kayla McBride. They have a tough decision to make there with her. I think she'll come back, but I don't know at what, what number that she'll come back at. But they have some tough decisions, but they also have it's intriguing to think about what they could do too, and what they, maybe it's not this off season, but they're building to maybe attract a free agent down the road that could kind of flip the switch and turn things around real fast. But they're setting themselves up, so it's a good spot to be in. Like you said, rebuilding's never fun, but once you get through it, it's definitely worth it. But well, Terrika, that's really all I have for you. I appreciate you jumping on the podcast and talking a little bit about yourself, the WNBA, and some Lynx basketball. And if you could one more time, if you could plug your work so people can find you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. You can, again, find me on Twitter at @SheKnowsSports. You can also find me on Instagram at @SheKnowsSports_. You can catch me on ESPN at Around the Rim. But definitely hang out with me on social media. I always plug my links there on my website, so you can find a lot of things there.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, and thanks for all your coverage of the league and women's basketball, and looking forward to following a lot of your work here moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you once again to Terrika for joining the podcast this week. As I said earlier, to start off this podcast, Terrika's great. Her knowledge of the game and the WNBA and each team is as you could tell and as you could hear is awesome. And that kind of insight was very nice to have on the podcast, and I appreciate her taking the time out of her busy schedule. I know she, being in the middle of the season, she's very busy, and I appreciate her taking some time out of her schedule to join Hitting the Hardwood. I also want to thank Jeremy Rushing, as I do every week, for producing this podcast. He does a great job in doing things on the back end for us, and he makes this podcast sound great every week, and I appreciate all the work that he does for Hitting the Hardwood. I also want to bring to light some news on a couple of our partnerships that we have here at Hitting the Hardwood. I mentioned Playback at the beginning, but there are two more, Homage and Better Edge. I appreciate them supporting not only Hitting the Hardwood, but women's basketball. A lot of you probably are familiar with Homage. They do a lot of vintage clothing, a lot of vintage gear. They do Lynx gear, they do WNBA gear, any other WNBA team, specifically for the WNBA I'm speaking. They do every team's logo on a t-shirt, on a sweatshirt. Both extremely comfortable. I've talked to multiple people, even just around the league that have the gear, and they absolutely love it. So go check them out. It's Homage, HOMAGE.com. And check us out on social media, or check out actually the Hitting Hardwood website. And you can find that on social media. Go to our partners page, check out all of our partners, but check out Homage. Click on those links for WNBA gear or Lynx gear. Every item you purchase through that will come back and support Hitting the Hardwood. So we appreciate everything that you can do. Otherwise, at least just go check them out. You don't even have to get WNBA gear. You can get any of their vintage gear or other gear that they have. It's a lot of great stuff, and it's extremely comfy too. The other one is Better Edge, as I mentioned. Better Edge, betteredge.com, BETTOR edge.com. I've loved using Better Edge this year. Better Edge they're not only great partners, but their platform that they have is a lot of fun to use, and it's very user friendly. And I oftentimes bet on WNBA games, sports in general, specifically WNBA games. I've bet all year long. You can do anything from betting, with yourself on whatever you might want to bet each game that you want to bet each night that's on the schedule. You can do that. You can do competitions. I regularly do competitions through Hitting the Hardwood on there. You can come compete against me, take my money, compete against other fans, other friends, other people on that platform. So go check them out. And then if you're signing up for the first time user, check out betteredge.com/links. And when you do so, make sure you follow Hitting the Hardwood, first of all. And then secondly, if you're signing up, use the promo code LYNX, LYNX, and you get free $20 in free play to begin playing. So at least check that out and go check out Better Edge. Like I said, it's a lot of fun to use. And if you're a bettor like me, it's definitely something you should check out on, and don't miss out on that. Other than that, I appreciate you joining the podcast this week. One more thing, I want to mention our Patreon page before I forget. Patreon is being a part of our Patreon community. I give a lot of our patrons kind of exclusive news and information before anybody else. Whether that's bonus content, exclusive content. I've written a few stories. I'll plan to do so each week here the rest of the season. You also get early access to podcasts such as this one. You can get podcasts every Monday rather than every Tuesday like everybody else does, and it's very cheap to do so. I don't do it for the money, but that helps, with the longevity and kind of ensuring the longevity of this podcast, so we can make it even bigger and even better. So I appreciate anything you can do. If you don't want to, spend the money right away, start a 7-day free trial, test it out. If you do like it, then consider maybe one of our memberships. I would appreciate you checking that out. That's patreon.com/hitting the hardwood. Once again, you can follow Hitting the Hardwood on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Make sure to follow us everywhere. You can follow me, Mitchell Hansen, on Twitter. It's M_Hansen13. That is where you'll find a lot of great stuff. Most recently, I just pushed out on Hitting the Hardwood and on my own social media platform, our Lynx store. There's a lot of cool gear. I'm obviously extremely biased, but I just bought the blue sweatshirt, Hitting the Hardwood sweatshirt. And that might be, I think I've worn it every day since I bought it. It's a very comfortable sweatshirt, and it's great stuff. And our patrons can get a 25% discount if you're a patron as well. But go check out the Hitting Hardwood store. You can find that on the Hitting Hardwood website. Go check out our social medias to find that link, and make sure you go check that out. Maybe you want to get a birthday gift, a upcoming Christmas gift. I know it's early to think about Christmas, but you never know. It's right around the corner. There's a lot of cool stuff: sweatshirts, t-shirts, long sleeves, sweatpants, hats, glasses, anything you can really think of. Beanie hats, trucker hats, bucket hats. You can get a lot of good stuff there, and I appreciate anything you can do to support Hitting the Hardwood and rep some, even if you want to rep some Lynx colors. It's red, white, and blue colors, gray color, just like the Lynx color scheme. So if you need more blue gear to go to the next Lynx game, make sure it's a Hitting the Hardwood sweatshirt, t-shirt, whatever it may be. So go check that out at the Hitting the Hardwood store. Once again, I appreciate you listening. I appreciate everybody and the positive feedback I've gotten on the podcast so far, and you returning every week to listen to the podcast. I really do enjoy what I do. I enjoy giving back to the game, and this is just another aspect of that to go along with maybe the written content that I write elsewhere. So make sure you come back next week, and I will see you all next week, and hopefully we can keep this strong stretch going for the Lynx, and keep this WNBA season going. We're already halfway there. So thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys next Tuesday.